property is one of the great Australian side hustles. The Australian investor has got between like 2 and 4 properties, PAYG workers, they're typically with pretty good jobs. Most of them are building a portfolio, or they're deemed to be successful building a portfolio. If you get between 5 or 6 properties, small business ain't for most people. It's hard being in business, right? That said, if you do that and do that well, manage your money, balance your things, have a good family balance sheet, you can be the CEO of your own business through property.
Talk about property equity versus sweat equity. So you put a lot of sweat equity into growing your business.
Heaps.
You know how much sweat equity goes in there. And it's almost like the Stephen Bradbury effect, where someone that's on less income, doing less hours, can earn more money through property and not having to do much. G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. My guest today, podcast extraordinaire, I'd say. So he's going to teach us a few things. It's nice to see on the other side of the mic here, Phil Tarrant. If you have listened to any property podcast, you would have come across the Smart Property Investment Podcast. I'm going to say that you guys are one of the originals, if not the original in this space when it comes to property podcasting.
One of the originals. We've been at it.
Humble.
We've been at it a while. This is our 10th year of podcasting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I've done a lot of property podcasts.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about what you've had on your chats and in your chats on the property Smart Property Investment Podcast. But Phil, I want to say thank you very much, mate. We've had the pleasure of knowing each other for quite some time.
We have done.
We've talked about trying to get this episode off the ground for some time as well.
I know. I'm a hard guy to get a hold of.
Busy man.
Hard guy to get a hold of sometimes. And I remember you when you were a banker working in marketing inside of banks. So
yeah, right.
I don't know if your audience knows.
They do know. They know the
backstory.
journey, mate. Yeah. I mean, let's go back because that's probably where our journeys, really crossed. We started crossing paths. So let me give you some context. Now you're known as Momentum Media. At the very start, you guys were Sterling Publishing, run by a really great dude called Alex Whitlock. You guys came along for the ride and started out with the magazine in our industries called The Advisor. That's where you guys started. Back in CBA, we used to advertise with you guys, and that's how we started to get to know each other. Now you guys have run the Australian Broking Awards, Better Business Summit, and I've seen you guys just build and build and build. Like success attracts more success. You guys started out investing in property. I remember those days you'd talk about going out to like Mount Druitt to do like renos. You'd go out there and do it yourselves. Yeah. So seeing that journey unfold, I think we've watched each other, different iterations in life. We're just talking about kids. You got 11, 9, 4. I remember when your third one came along because that's similar to our little Zara as well. And man, I've got to say, a lot of respect for you, honestly. What you guys have built, what you've personally built, and what you do at Smart Property Investment Podcast. I've got to say, it's honestly inspired me to be where I am today with this podcast.
Oh, mate, no, really appreciate the sentiments. And, I'm a big fan of your podcast and, I keep an eye on it and see who you're talking to. And, a lot of familiar faces for me, having knocked around property for so many years. But, I'm a big advocate of property podcasting. That's a great mechanism for upskilling people. One of the worst things I hear are people who are going to want to invest in property and never get around to it. And, information today is so accessible. We've been doing it for 10 years. There's nothing really around property investment we haven't spoken about in those 10 years, and probably 1,400 podcasts.
It's crazy.
Counting.
Yeah.
So it's all out there.
Yeah.
But, you get really good practitioners like you and your business who rubber hits the road. I can't remember last time we got together, you had a mantra or something around decision makers and action takers. Can you remind me?
The property market rewards action takers and decision makers.
There you go.
So you can do a lot with knowing. You can know a lot of stuff, but you've actually got to implement.
You got to do something about it, right?
Do it, yeah, absolutely.
Got to do something about it. And like you're really good at the doing, and I sort of sit at the probably the front end of the doing that is through podcasting, actually giving information to people to actually help shape and potentially persuade, potentially cajole, potentially motivate people into property investment, giving them the knowledge to be able to know how to go about doing it. But it still comes down to people like yourself on the mortgages side and the very good buyers agents that Australia has to help people get stuck into it, and accountants like,
big time. Yeah,
people sit around and do nothing, then you got to get stuck in.
Mate, well said. I mean, some of the names that when you look, you mentioned us having some good names, but the names that you've had come across your portfolio, your property podcast, best names in the industry. So if you're looking for somewhere to go that's top of the food chain, Smart Property Investment Podcast.
How's that for a plug?
How's
it? All right. Didn't need to do it myself.
Mate, I remember coming on Sienna was just born. Like that's that was
some
one
time
of,
ago.
That was, and we've unpacked a fair bit. Like even going back to remember the interest only crackdown.
Yeah,
I did a big piece around
2017-ish, was it?
Mate,
Was it back then?
yeah, and then post COVID, and I think again just going back a long time and seeing the journey. But one thing you guys have done exceptionally well is be open with your portfolio. That takes a lot of balls to kind of lay bare the portfolio. This is what we're buying. And like I said at the very start, the journey, were you guys using a buyer's agent at the start?
Yeah, from the absolute get-go. And can I give them a shout out?
100%.
Okay? The Right Property Group.
Yeah,
So
Victor Kumar,
Victor Kumar and Steve Waters. Then we were just annoyed with it all. Like, honestly, we to your point, we now own media assets across pretty much every area that touches corporate Australia or national security and defence and all that. We're all over the joint, right?
You are.
It's really, really cool.
So if you're just touching on these, glaze over that. You guys cut across legal industry, accounting industry, mortgage and finance. Now you're into defence.
We're in defence, national security, space, as in like rockets and stuff.
Yeah.
Cyber, aviation, the whole wealth management sector, so funds management, superannuation, self-managed super, real estate's another big one. So we sort of, which is really privileged position to sit across all those different sectors, and I sort of get a pulse check every single day about what's going on. So we cover all those specific areas, but our sort of birth was around that sort of mortgage and real estate sector. So the advisor, which you spoke about, which for mortgage brokers, and I remember when we started that, mortgage broker share was 30-something%. Now it's 75%. Our latest numbers from the MFAA. So stuff like the advisor, it's played its role to help be a supportive voice and a bit of a wingman, if you want to call it, for the mortgage broking sector as it's gone through that growth. So we get great satisfaction out of that. We're very conscious that a lot of the stuff we talk about and the events that we put on and the information we create helps shapes attitudes and opinions, and that sort of can help set or craft the direction of these industries. So it's a cool thing to do. But around property investment, we kicked that off around it's got to be 2008 is when we started doing stuff in and around property investment. 2008, 2009, we had the original magazine, which was Smart Property Investment.
That's right.
Which you used to buy on news agents and subscribe to and all that sort of stuff. We were quick to pivot, going, that's cool, but that's probably done. I think the future is podcasting, right? But even in the magazine, to your point, we said there's so much BS, and it's probably a PG type, podcast here. So I'll keep the language. And by the way, I'm not a swearer on podcasts. And one of the reasons why, and it's a good point for other property podcasters, is that the feedback I get is that parents listen to podcasts on road trips,
correct,
right, with their kids,
Yeah.
and in many ways. And I get this is a really good sort of second and third order effective order, is that we're educating kids just because they're listening to their parents listen to property podcasts. So it's a really, really cool thing. So, to everyone out there that tunes into podcasts, like, do it in the car with your kids, and you'll be surprised the questions they start asking you. They'll start getting curious, inquisitive about property portfolio. But I digress. When we started creating media around property investment, every story out there was already some mags out there and books and a lot of spruikers, if you want to call them that, out there. You only heard the stories that were successful in property investment, how I turned into a millionaire overnight type stories, right?
I mean, that's the one that you'd automatically flip to in the magazine.
You flip to, look at it.
Straight away, the case studies going, they built this portfolio. How did they do it?
How did they do it?
Scotty O'Neill at the start was like, you see him in there, all the mags.
Which is really inspirational, right? And it still exists today in different guys. But we look at it and we go, no way. Like, you're just glazing over the realities, right? But the real facts of property investing, you only heard the bits that were absolutely perfect and right all the time. You never saw the stories where it all went wrong. Now, you would pick up these magazines and just assume that nothing goes wrong in property. And that wasn't the case. So we went, stuff it. Myself and Alex, we went, let's build a portfolio publicly. I think it was probably the first time it was really ever done.
Totally.
And we went, let's kick off, and we started buying properties, and we built that portfolio up to, maybe 18 or 19 assets. And we didn't think, and we're like, that's pretty cool, And the thing was humming along, right? We started investing in around the time when sort of Western Southwest Sydney was starting to fire. So we bought a heap of assets out there.
Totally.
You know, like for you look at the numbers now and the mind boggles, right? You're getting houses at, you know, sub $300,000, and you know, we did a lot of like we created a lot of equity in through renovations and all that sort of stuff. But we went, let's do it warts and all, and we'll show you where we stuffed it up, and we're very honest with our stuff ups, and of which there were many. But what it goes to show though is that even though you get, like, we didn't get anything fundamentally wrong, we didn't even really get anything really wrong, but the mistakes that every property investor makes, property's a pretty forgiving game, right? So we said, let's map it, let's show how we build it, let's include all the costs. Like, you know, I do sort of P&Ls on reno projects, and I'd say, you know, $27 because I bought, you know, the tradie some bacon rolls, or I, you know, got them a slab of longies after a hard day's work or something or other, right? Like, I priced everything in, completely documented, and said, this is the real number on what this thing costs, and this is the return, this is the upside. And people absolutely loved it. You know, we still retain, I haven't looked at it for a little while, it's bad, but maybe 12 or 13 assets in that portfolio.
Yeah, okay.
And largely we refinanced some of it recently, not recently, a couple of years ago. So it all sits in different trusts and whatnot. But one of the trusts where we have quite a lot of assets, which is we've never refinanced, like positively geared to the yin yang now. And you just sit and go, so that's how it works. That's how it works. Time.
Oh, mate, that's literally what I've got written here, which is I've seen it from then to now, and just time has been your best friend on top of taking action, then having a really good team around you. So if I look back and trace your team, Victor Kumar, he's still buying. He's doing some stuff for some of our clients still.
Oh, is he? Yeah, great. Mate, he's like Victor. I saw him the other day.
An Energizer bunny.
Mate, he's as hungry as ever, and his passion for property has never waned. Like, and he's you know, what I see with Victor, and I'm probably one of the very few people that can talk about all property people without any real bias, without any real bias or agenda, right? Or fear or favor as well, right? But what I see with Victor, and it's a really funny, and I sometimes query it with some of these sort of very high performing buyers agents, but Victor is still doing a lot of the stuff he's always done. Like, strategically, nothing's really changed. He's still buying really smart, under market value assets at the right time in cycles and holding on to them. He's got quite a large portfolio.
He does.
He's still doing that stuff, and he does it well, and largely and fundamentally that's the core proposition he offers his clients. But he's also doing other stuff right now. I know he's doing, you know, sort of more interconnected sort of developments. Like, he's doing all the real hands-on tactical stuff, really complemented by really smart sort of buy and hold type, capital growth type property. So he does it really, really well. So he was absolutely core to our team at that point in time. Roscoe, and maybe this is a news flash. Ross has just launched a buyer's agency.
Mate, correct. I had a chat with Ross probably a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, good.
And he's back.
He's back. He's back. So Ross, Ross probably used to win all the awards that you now win at the Australian Broker Awards, as sort of like
Ross is
Broker of the Year.
Broker of the Year.
But he was like
Aussie number one
Aussie. He had a great practice out in Para, which is still going.
Yeah.
They're still kicking goals all over the joint, Aussie Parramatta. And he got to the point in his broken career where it's like, he had a big portfolio. You should get him on the show. And
we've unpacked his portfolio.
Oh, really? Yeah. So a good portfolio. You know, he's spent a couple of years trying to work out what's next life after broking. And I know he's a high performance broker coach, which he still does. He's very methodical, Roscoe. And his passion for broking, you know, never waned, because he was really the steward and the custodian of the financing for so many of today's big property investors.
Well, I mean,
right? You know,
because you jumped into the show and like literally is like a honeypot.
It's like, a guy,
So, you know, the second that you guys say you're using Ross, like halo effect, right? You just literally, people just, I remember that at one point says he just had to fight people over the stick because he couldn't have that many houses.
So Ross has joined, and I'm assuming this is all public record stuff. So Ross has joined KHI Partners, which is the big accounting and sort of wealth sort of creation firm that Munzrul Khan, who's an accountant who a lot of people may know.
Munzrul been on as well?
Has Munzrul been on this show? Is he? Oh, there you go. Yeah. So he's joined there to launch a buyer's agent's arm, and he'll do well, Ross, because he knows finance intimately.
Correct.
And he knows how to do investment finance, but he's also a very, very capable property investor. So he was part of the core team through, I think, I can't remember whether it was through the guys over at Right Property or through Aussie that we met Munzerl, who's been our accountant for all our wealth creation stuff for years. And through them, we've met conveyancers and private bankers, and it's just cascaded out the
dream team.
The dream team, this sort of interconnected team of professionals who all have a role to play, but and this would be a secret to success for all property investors who will get on with each other, who understand the uniqueness of each of the things that they do, have great respect for it, and they're able to position themselves in the sequence at any point in time, depending on where the strategy is going. So, at times you'll be maybe buyer's agent led, where you go, okay, I'm buying now. But then you'll get a pivot where your accountant will be sort of the hub, who was determining, dictating investment decisions, because you've got other things at play. So, and they're all able to sequentially know where they sit at any point in time and work together.
That's that key point. I think harmony within the team becomes critical. It's probably where we start to see disharmony is someone's trying to be more righter than someone else. Like the planners, planners coming in and shutting.
You don't want no
down.
ego. There's no ego in your team,
well
right? If you see ego, you smell ego, it's not going to work.
Correct.
Get on top of it quickly, and you might need to make hard decisions. We haven't. Or maybe some conveyances, we haven't really outgrown any of our key team members, whereas a lot of people do, and you've got to be okay with that, and you'll often find you start outgrowing your advisors when you start seeing those dynamics, when you start seeing a bit of friction, when you start seeing a little bit of ego coming in, when you start seeing people go, well, I don't think you should do this, you should be doing this, right? They should be able to collectively serve you, and then when you start seeing ego emerging, that's times when maybe you may have started outgrowing some of your advisors.
Yeah, nicely said.
As a tip.
Nicely said.
And it happens with mortgage brokers as well. I often find that your mortgage broker is often maybe the first person you outgrow.
Well said. Well said. And I think it gets to the point for us, I think a lot of brokers, when clients come to us and their broker hasn't been supportive, it's either through a lack of knowledge or they're projecting their own insecurities. Like, why are you doing that? Like, why do you want to buy so many properties? Like, well, hang on. Who made you the decision maker of how big their portfolio should be? If they want to go and they want to go hard for a short period of time, or you go into acquisition phase, be the enabler as opposed to the handbrake as well. Or they've got their team in their back pocket that they want to work with exclusively as well. So
that's a good point. Also, if someone tries it quickly, if you've got longer-standing relationships and you find a new advisor in some capacity and they're quick to sort of shift you over, I just it could be okay, but you just got to be considerate of that, right? And be aware. But again, a lot of people think with property investment, because they get told get a good A team and they'll sort everything out. You're ultimately responsible for everything. You got to lead. You got to steer them. You're the CEO of your portfolio. Consider them your executives. You've got a finance executive. You've got a strategy executive. You've got a
chief risk officer in there.
Chief risk officer, but it's your job to be the CEO of that team. And I actually had a chat with Munzerl the other month around this, where we sort of started framing, your accountant, if you've got a largish portfolio, should be acting and operating like a CFO.
Absolutely.
You're the CEO. Your job is to steer. You're not supposed to be an expert at everything. You need to know the direction. You're accountable for the direction. You're accountable for the outcome. But you want these executives to be accountable to you, but you need to lead them the right way. You need to lead them by giving them what they need in order to do their job properly.
Nicely said. That's, I think, if you've been listening for some time, that's why we do a lot of mindset work. We do a lot of psychology work, because when you move into that part, exactly what you're saying, leadership, self-leadership becomes really important, where you can have those hard conversations where people aren't getting back on time. It's like, right, when you have a chat, what are time frames looking like, for example, when someone's not pulling their weight, or I think just that ability to call it out. It's hard, difficult conversations at times. And other times it's like, they're telling you what to do. It's like, perfect, I'm gonna put this in your hands and you tell me, and I'll be led by you as well. Sometimes you're leading,
that's a great place to be. Great place. Yeah, the best leaders I know are led well. They listen to advice, they listen to counsel, they give the capacity of the people who they're entrusting to give the advice, You don't want to surround yourself with yes men or women.
Correct.
where you're just in an echo chamber of decision making where they just go, you're right. You want to be challenged. If you're not up for being challenged as a property investor, you're probably not going to be successful.
The journey's wrought with challenges.
It is, and you've got to be pretty resilient with it all.
You've got a property manager in there, and you've got tenants to manage. So there's all these variables that come, that can pop their head up, repairs and maintenance. And I mean, your journey, when you talk openly and candidly about the journey that you've been on with your own portfolio, that's probably why those episodes do so well. It's because people want real talk.
Yeah, they do. And I'm happy to put myself like, I don't get it right. I don't look at any sort of, I don't think I get too many haters out there, but it's just, it's okay to get it wrong. Like, you're going to get it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong. Just don't get it wrong all the time. Don't get it wrong more than once. Like, you learn from your mistakes. And this was one of the catalysts of the portfolio, was to go and do it and give people permission to forgive themselves for stuffing stuff up. Because you have to. If you don't do that, you're not going to get anywhere. So, we were happy to put ourselves out there, and we still do it today, going, stuffed it up. Okay. So, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Not investing in mining towns, right? And again, it comes down to your risk appetite. How you plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
How bad is the worst? Your attitude to risk is what's worse. But, so we've done that, and back to this sort of concept of being a leader and running your own, thing. Property is one of the great Australian side hustles.
Without a doubt.
It's one of the great Australian side hustles. And because we work in and around property, we meet a lot of people. And I find it sort of sometimes clouds your frame of reference to what you think a property investor is, because you just get this sort of immersive assumption that everyone's big portfolios doing it's not. We did a sort of reader and a viewer and a listener survey on smart property, about a month or so ago. And it was really good, recalibration for me, just to check some of my mindset around it, because you sort of start getting, you lose your way a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And it pretty much said the Australian investor has got between 2 and 4 properties. They're PAYG workers, they're typically with pretty good jobs, or they're SME business owners, right? That's it. They're not building 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 property portfolios. Most of them are building a portfolio, or they're deemed to be successful building a portfolio. If you get between 5 or 6 properties, you're at the top end, right?
Totally.
So it was a really good frame of reference for me, and it sort of got me again thinking about this. It is a great Australian side hustle. Do your job. Small business ain't for most people. 97% of all Australian businesses are small businesses. They employ the lion's share of Australians, critical to the national economy. It's hard being in business, right? And most people, probably get some hate on this, are better suited as PAYG employees. That said, if you do that and do that well, manage your money well, balance your things, have a good family balance sheet, you can be the CEO of your own business through property. Back to the point, get the team around you, lead them, craft them. And I tell you what, it's going to be a lot more forgiving building wealth as a side hustle, inverted commas, in property than what it is drop shipping something out of China to try and sell it at a market somewhere.
Or doing a vending machine or whatever.
Or anything like that. I walk through these markets sometimes with, 200 people all trying to sell something, right? And I sit there and I just go, you're putting your heart and soul into this stuff. You're passionate about it. All this stuff is cool, but the time, energy, and effort that most people put into those type of activities, if they channeled that same amount of time, energy, and effort into something which, inverted commas, is maybe a bit boring and not as glamorous, property investment, the outcomes might be quite different.
Mate, I've seen that time and time again, and it goes back to one of the episodes I've done, which I talk about property equity versus sweat equity. So you put a lot of sweat equity into growing your business. Heaps. You know how much sweat equity goes in there. And it's almost like the Stephen Bradbury effect, where someone that's on less income, doing less hours, can earn more money through property and not having to do much active work to build out a few property portfolio, compared to someone that's on the tools, working their business, grinding away, because they followed a passion project and it's not returning the yields. If they just put that time and effort into property, they would have come up with a better result.
It's crazy, right?
It almost becomes offensive to me when I have these small business owners that are not making enough money. I was like, dude, if you just bought property, you would have become far better off. There's no money in super because they're not paying themselves enough. And it just has this cascade.
So that's back to the point. We're at the front end of these things. So I'm happy to chat about it and maybe sort of, throw some challenging ideas out there for
Yeah.
people. But if that sort of sparks a bit of a realignment of their thinking or challenges a line of thought, and therefore they take action, that's brilliant. That's when they need great mortgage brokers and et cetera. But so many times I hear, and I've interviewed hundreds, thousands of property investors, right, where the story goes where they're like, they're sort of white collar or blue collar, workers that make good money, where their boss goes, how have you got 4 or 5 investment properties? Like, I know how much you earn.
Yes.
I'm 10 years ahead of you in your career.
Yes.
You obviously want to be me in the future because that's the pathway that you're on. And they'll go, boss, mate, like I'm investing
I'll
in
actually
property.
earn more than you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've got people that have their direct bosses. They're earning more in property. The boss has got a lifestyle. They're earning more on paper, but they've got no assets to show for it.
No asset. And you see, like, it's those bosses, execs, male and female, who go normally in their 50s, like peak earning years, and they go, oh, I've got to do something about this, and that's when they start probably calling you up, and you
Totally.
go,
and we've got to really motor at that point to catch up. And then it goes back to your very point around time. If you'd swallowed the ego and bought yourself a 500K, almost cheapies when they're like earning, 300-400 grand, like I'm going to buy a $500,000 property. That would do some heavy lifting in the 10 years that you need that to retire. Because, at that point it's lifestyle creep. We see 250K, 300K, 400K incomes. Awesome. Some people can invest really well and some people spend that very well.
Yeah. Oh, they do. You spend what you get, right?
Yeah.
So that's the smart property investment portfolio. So we get a bit of pushback now. People go, we want more. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm having to talk about it.
So why aren't you guys buying more, out of curiosity?
We are, but we're just not buying it inside of the smart property investment portfolio.
Okay.
So look, we might do something in the future. We're sort of talking about it at the moment. Like,
I'll watch the space. It sounds a bit coy.
But like, we're still investing in property. We're just not. So we created that as an example for how to go about doing it. But it was always like, we'll build it. Property isn't all about the acquisition side of things. Again, the big survey we did, like most of people's commentary around property and property podcasts is, what are you buying, where are you buying, why are you buying it there, right? Dude. Like, that's one small bit of it, right?
We specifically stay away from those conversations, which is, and I'll tell people why. If I put 5 locations here and said invest here, but 1, you weren't able to get the borrowing capacity, 2, you couldn't get the finance done quickly, 3, it was outpacing your ability to get into that market. What's the point in knowing the hotspot if you weren't even ready? That's probably the big challenge I see people going. You could do it right now. There's Read them and a few other guys. They're blowing locations wide open. I'm like, fair play. So they're telling you where to buy. So why aren't you buying there if you know it? You got to get your house in order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's everything else, right?
Yeah.
So now the portfolio is everything else. We've done the buying. It's sitting there. It's growing. We're managing it.
Cool.
Which this is bits that I do a bit of a half-assed job on. Like, I imagine people, the portfolio that we're looking at every single day and making sure everything is like perfect. Like, I occasionally look at it when something happens. I've got this problem, got this issue, I've got this whatever, this interest rate reduction, right? Like, I'll go back in, I'll check the banks, have they passed it on? We had one the other month, there's another one coming downstream soon. So it's passive in many ways. Like, it's not consuming a lot of time. But the return on the value of my time spending more time in that portfolio probably wouldn't return much more.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable with just doing enough for it to be good enough.
Yeah, cool.
If that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing there is the time that you've had to get to this point now where it's not as hands-on. That's only in less than 20 years. So if someone listening going, right, just getting started, allow yourself a good amount of time, both in your property, in your business as well. Like you said, peak earning years become 50, and we get some 20-something-year-olds, 30s that they feel like they're missing out. They've got to get them. Absolutely, I love the fervor, I love the energy. But you got to give yourself that time to see the fruits of your labor, and just at the start of your career. So generally, your income's low, your deposit's low, borrowing capacity's low. So it's like scraping the barrel to get in. But if you can get in,
do whatever you can to get in.
Yeah.
Do whatever you can to get in. It's not going to be perfect. What you start with is probably not going to be what you're going to end with. But if you can start, let time. Like, we've had that portfolio. And then we started buying in 2012, 2013. It's a sort of 12. It's not, it's
not a massive amount of
just
time,
over a
12,
decade,
yeah.
10, 15 years.
Mm.
But it's served us well. We've sold stuff out of it now.
Cool.
A lot of the stuff we sold out in western suburbs, it all doubled, if not tripled. Got to pay tax on it. So it comes back to the point now. Now we're talking about effective management of it, and the management is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Getting your mortgages right, making sure that your broker's interrogating it, making sure everything's right. All the taxation aspects of it also. Still lots to talk about. Still
Absolutely.
lots to talk about.
So, I mean, going back to you said thousands, you had thousands of conversations. What are some common themes that you see pop up between, say, investors, professionals in the space, your brokers, your BAs, your accountants, for example? What are some of the common themes that you just generally hear come up time and time again?
It sort of ebbs and flows depending on what markets are doing.
Yeah.
The big theme now.
Yeah.
How quickly do you need to get into Melbourne markets before you've really going to miss your time? That's what the real sort of strategic people are talking about now.
Okay.
And they're going like, we're watching it. It's already moving. It's already shifting. It's not like red alert, you've missed it type of thing. But the Melbourne market will be an interesting one. If you're in there, you're going to get all of the uplift. But you've got to work out when you get in. So that's a big thing.
I think we've spoken about that, which is you might be early, but you may not be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were like that in Queensland, right?
Yeah.
We were early. We certainly weren't wrong. We went into Queensland in, I can't remember, maybe 16, 17.
Wow.
And
very early, yeah.
And we're like, why isn't this doing what the city market did? And nothing happened. But then kicked in the gear, and we still have all those. We never sold anything up there. It's a real bedrock of that smart property portfolio. So that's one theme is around Melbourne. Everyone's talking about interest rates, what's going to happen. But largely, your sophisticated investor, it doesn't matter. Even sort of your average investor, it doesn't really matter that much. People are going, well, it's got to increase serviceability. You do the math, maybe a bit, but it's not really going to really change whether or not you can buy or not buy your next investment property because of interest rate reduction.
Yeah.
There'll be parts of it, shades of it, and to be dependable. The emergence of buyers agencies.
I'm glad you said it. This is amazing, isn't it?
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
In many ways, we've used buyers agents for 10 years, right? Some of the original, like the guys over at Right Property were one of the original crew, which is good. And I think buyers agents are a great asset for investors, the right investors, not all investors. Again, you sort of sit in an echo chamber and you think everyone's using buyers agents. Most people aren't using buyers agents.
I mean, correct. I mean, when I put it in the purchase breakdown and I always provision for a BA, they're like, no, we're not using a BA. I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah. So what would your stats be? Because no one knows the numbers, right? Like no one knows what percentage of transactions actually have a buyer's agent.
Yeah. Look, if I went through it, purely shooting from the hip, I'd say 3/4 of our buyers use a buyer's agent.
Okay.
I think largely due to the pond that we fish in, people are listening. So they're very familiar with the value a buyer's agent can bring. They do the research on BAs that we bring on as well. And they know, and they're generally time poor working professionals that if they try to do it themselves, it'd be the last, like you said, I think even about your portfolio, it gets kicked down to the bottom of the priority list because there's so much more important things. That's super important, but urgent things will then take over that. A lot of people have kids or families and they've got other work demands. So it's like, okay, I'll get to it. Gets past 3-4 months, we're doing another pre-approval. At that point, we're saying, do we really need to renew this pre-approval? Have you considered a buyer's agent? Because if you've been out of the market for 5-6 months, I had someone the other day, they've been out of the market since September just because they're trying to figure out rates. I was like, dude, being in the market for 8 months would crap all over those rates that you're trying to save, and a 5% uplift, 6% uplift in that time, it just eats rates for breakfast.
Action takers, decision makers, right?
There you go.
That's certainly what it comes down to. So the emergence of buyers agents, I caution the industry on it.
Nice one. Yeah.
We need to be. I think there's a huge upside for the buyer's agent profession in the future of real estate in Australia. Absolutely, unequivocal point. There's some exceptional operators out there who are supporting Aussies, all the things that we're talking about. However, there's maybe a little bit like mortgage broking in the early days. It was a bit of they call it a bit of a wild west, cowboys. And it took the government to come in and largely regulate it through a number of different mechanisms. You want to call it regulation. There's a lot of accountabilities for mortgage brokers now. Your best interest duties. You got to operate under the NCCP.
Very good.
All this stuff. So you can't misbehave as a broker anymore, because there was some, not all, it would be a fraction,
very small fraction, great,
who accelerated the shift and the change for it. Now, buyer's agency is really difficult. It's going to be hard to regulate, from what I understand, because property is not considered a real asset or real. There's some definition.
Which makes it very hard to understand, because it is a real asset.
It is a real asset. Yeah. So I think it's something to do with the definition, which is going to make it difficult to regulate or legislate over. And it also sits at the center of the Australian psyche and economy, right? Like, it's a big deal. So when I start hearing commentary around, hey, become a part-time buyer's agent, get paid really, really well without having to do too much work, and you get paid a commission for doing that. Like, when I hear that language, I start getting concerns about it, because I don't think that's what buyer's agents are in Australia. Yeah. When you think of some of the standout buyer's agencies in Australia, and the ones that most people will be familiar with, some of the, big names. Big names. And I sort of muse with them every now and then. We sort of talk about generations, right? Generation. I think it was probably into our third or fourth generation of buyer's agents. Yeah. Your first generation, your really early operators.
Simon Presley. I mean, they used to advertise in the magazines.
Simon Presley, right? Rich Harvey, Bill and Bryce down at Empower, really good outfit. The guys like Right Property Group, they're your, and then they flew under the radar, and they were happy. Flying under the radar. They would
to
do
say to someone that
sessions.
You're paying 20 grand to use it, them to buy a property for you, whatever it was back in the day, 12 grand. Everyone was,
it was one of the best kept secrets in property for a little while, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe we come along and start talking about it and stuff that, but the people who knew, and I'd like to think we were one of the people who knew.
Absolutely,
we knew. We were out there, and we really capitalized off that, and it was great. So it's your sort of first generation. Your second generation to come in would be, they're really good operators. Guys like your Scott O'Neill, over at Rethink, Paul Glossop at Pure Property. You had this cohort who come in, and they've now been around for a decade plus. Really good operators, really sort of, a lot of them use some of these original buyer's agents, right? And they were born out of it. And the buyer's agency sector is a great manufacturer of the next generation of buyer's agents or property investment. So you had that sort of cohort. Then you had another generation come through, and they're doing exceptionally well. People like your Arjun Paliwell's over in Power Wealth. He's created a really sort of functional business that's delivering. Sam Gordon, over at APS. He's doing well. And they're out to serve property investors, right? Now they've all got different ways of doing things. But they're all driven to the right thing. So they're the sort of nucleus, and there's many others, right?
Yeah, but that next generation is very much like they've got the socials, they're a bit different. They've got the assets like podcasts, videos, like they've got a lot of engagement with probably a younger generation coming through as well.
Young cohort. And by the way, most, you might be getting a lot of people liking or watching your social feeds, but a lot of them aren't the ones who are buying investment property. They're your boring 40 and 50 and 60-year-old sort of mum and dads who are doing stuff like, they're not the, so that cohort, those sort of, sort of distinct sort of generations coming through, they're very much the custodians of I would say, and I'd say this to them, shaping and growing the profession, which they have been doing from a view towards professionalism. It is a professional business.
Yes,
it is. You are fundamentally guiding the decision making, which will either set up people for retirement or create a very different outcome for them. Largely, they get it right, which is great. And it's a really, really important role. They're trusted partners. And how or where we get to some sort of regulation or legislation around it, I don't know. It's above my pay grade. I'm not smart enough to work that out, right? But there's an inherent responsibility, and I think they all understand what that
those players,
responsibility
I'd say
is.
100%. Those
do.
players,
but it's a
do.
profession.
Yeah,
it's a profession. Like, you know, being a buyer's agent is a profession. It's a calling, I think, but then it's a profession. You know, so the caution to the industry is very much around, we need to make sure that buyer's agents are projected correctly within their important role in the property ecosystem, and it needs to be seen as a professional.
Yeah.
I don't think buyer's agency should be seen as a side hustle or a part-time job. You know,
same with any of these industries, mate. Mortgage broker, get my bee in a bonnet when I have, you know, side hustle brokers. You cannot keep up policy. Same with financial planning.
You can't be part-time. I wouldn't go to a part-time surgeon to get my knee done, right? Like, I'm going to go to the best there is, who's done it more than anyone else, and probably the one that teaches every other surgeon how to do it, right? Use the same logic.
Yeah.
So
nice.
be careful. So that's one of the themes. But sort of holistic themes for property investment I've seen over a decade of podcasting. Wish I started earlier. I wish I did more when I could have done more. So most people had the time again. They're the two things that they would work
exactly
on.
Right.
You know, so don't be that. I'm that. You know, wish I started earlier. Wish I did more. And even now, like, you know, this is the thing. A lot of people think I spent all of my days doing property. I think a lot about it, and I'm sort of involved. You know, I get to speak to people like yourself, but
we put ourselves much lower down the priority list.
We do.
That's
like, you know,
happens,
but property, my personal wealth creation through property, like it is the, you know, it doesn't get a lot of airspace, headspace. That said, though, I've done enough that even if I don't do anything,
there you go. Yeah.
You're
not missing. You're not.
I'm not missing.
Yeah,
but it frustrates me, right?
Yeah.
So I speak to so many people and just go, look what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I should be doing that, and I'll get frustrated with it. You know, probably most property investors, I get frustrated with the fact I'm not doing anything, and I'll get back to my computer or go to a next meeting, right? And I just go, I never get around to it. So I intend to do more.
All right, watch your space.
Yeah.
Now, mate, I'm very excited because I've heard what you're doing on a whole new platform. And I'm very curious to find out. This obviously impacts property investors, property managers as well. It's a managed app.
Yeah.
So we're going to include links to it in the show notes as well. But tell us more about what is managed app and how is this idea born?
Okay, managed. All right.
Managed app.
Yeah, managedapp.com. Yeah, managed. So so manage is probably one of the most exciting things I've seen in real estate for a long time. It's one of the reasons why we invested in it. So amongst sort of many other things that I do in and around property, my day job is the CEO of Managed.
Yeah,
so Managed is it's a payments company.
Okay.
So what it does really, really simply is it removes and has removed trust accounting from real estate rental transactions. So rents and everything else that happens in and around the transactions in property management. So you're a tenant, I'm a landlord.
Yeah.
You have a property manager. Typically, the tenant pays the property manager. Money sits in their trust account for upwards of maybe a month, and then they do a reconciliation and they pay me, the property investor, my money for the rent. So that's how it's worked for many, many years, and it's how all of the, you know, state-based sort of legislation has been drafted around protecting that. And we see and hear it every single day. Agents nicking money from trust accounts. It happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's the fringe, but it happens. Like people nicking stuff from trust account.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of fraud around it all and all that sort of stuff. So what's Managed done? It's removed the trust account from that. So you as the tenant, when you pay your rent, me as the investor, I get paid immediately. Put that money in my offset account, saving interest. The real estate agent that manages, or the property manager that manages property, gets paid their fee immediately, and then any other money that needs to go anywhere in order for maintaining that property, rents, rates, council rates, water rates, repairs and maintenance, tradie bills, anything else that's required, gets paid at the same time. So money gets paid, just goes out to everyone. It's direct and instant and automated. So it's removed for property managers and property agencies the trust accountant from the transaction, saving a lot of money as a result of it, and has got rid of all of the reconciliations around doing it. It's all smart. It's got digital wallets that all talk to each other. It's super cool tech.
Wow.
So it's allowing property managers and property agencies to be super efficient, spending more time on servicing their investors, as portfolio managers, and going out and winning more managements without having to deal with all the unnecessary and very frustrating and soul-destroying manual reconciliations. Investors get paid straight away. Tradies get paid straight away. And I tell you what, as an investor, if your tradie gets paid straight away and you've got another issue you need fixing, they'll be at your house first before anyone else, rather than waiting around for getting paid. So it's completely transforming real estate rental transactions.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's the numbers they're getting big.
Well, I see, like you've done like $3 billion worth of transactions.
Yeah, we're doing about 110 million a month in transactions through the platform. We just marked 3 billion in transactions. So they're big numbers with B's in it, right?
Yes.
Because when you sit there and just go, wow, right? It's the real deal, and fast forward 50 years, absolutely, but fast forward 10 years, no one's going to be using trust accounting in real estate rental transactions. Like, it's been removed pretty much largely everywhere else. We can now rely on really smart technology to transact money. We do it every day. We tap with everything. Everything is direct, connected, automated transactions. Why don't we have it in real estate? And with an eye towards the future of cyber threats, manipulation of fraud through financial systems, or the AML type requirements coming in, theft through humans of trust accounting, like that all just largely goes away through really smart technology. So it's cool. Excellent. Really, really cool.
Has there been any friction around implementation? Like why isn't it more, for example?
Yeah, and it should be a lot more. And a lot of it is people are just so used to doing a particular way, and all the incumbent property management software has been built around trust accounts and trust accountants. So, I penned a piece on this a couple of months ago that the property management industry is at crisis point. And for those of you who use property managers, and I imagine most of the listeners of this would do, like, it's a tough job.
Oh, mate, we've had property managers on here. I call them the unsung hero of a portfolio.
It's a tough job. They probably play one of the most important roles for property investors. Yeah. Once you get beyond the buying,
asset managers.
They're asset managers, right?
Great.
It's a hard job. It's a tough job. It's a relentless job. They never get thanked.
And they've got two fairly, I won't say ungrateful. They're working for two clients. One of them pays them.
Absolutely right. And they get stuck in the middle, and they've got to. It's hard work. Yeah. Like, it's really, really hard work. And
it's generally where a junior gets thrown in an agent.
To start, right? But this is where most real estate agents are creating their wealth is in the value of their rent roll, right? Yeah. So it's a huge asset that needs to be managed, but there is not enough property managers in Australia today. We're not only bleeding them; they'll do it for a while, they'll get burned out, and they'll move on.
Massively.
Turnover's huge.
Massively.
And because it's a tough job, you're probably not attracting the best and brightest people into it. Even though we have a great cohort of property managers in Australia, we just can't find the people. And fundamentally, you're going to have a workforce who's overworked and stressed, and therefore not delivering great value to their clients. But more importantly, it's not great from a personal perspective for them. So, I would say the property industry needs to be directing all its resources and capabilities, ourselves included in our own little way, in supporting what is the crisis of property management in Australia. We need it working well. More Australians are going to be renting long term, into the future. If we don't have the right people there at the centre of ensuring all the different stakeholders are connected and engaged and getting done what they need to do, it's going to decimate things. So, this software helps ameliorate some of those challenges through getting rid of a lot of the stuff that you like. It's just try and find a really good trust accountant. These days, like, no one wants to do it. Correct. Right.
It'd be largely offshored as well, wouldn't it?
It would be, right? Yeah. But it's like you think of every single. You've got your own properties, right? Imagine having to audit every single thing that's coming in. Technology can do this stuff these days, particularly as AI gets plugged in. So, we need to be putting and layering in the building blocks to create a sustainable industry initially, but an industry that can thrive through property management. Technology is one part of those things, but we need to be working collectively and cohesively to drive it forward, because people talk about the housing crisis, people talk about the cost of living crisis. There's a huge crisis in property management. Not enough has been said about it. Thanks for letting me get in the soapbox talk about it. But it's critical.
Preach.
It's absolutely critical. So, we'll go some way to trying to resolve that, and let's turn property management into an attraction industry.
Yeah, I think it gives them the chance to do what they do best, which is resolve issues, get properties, rented out on time, minimal downtime for an investor. Happy tenants, less turnover is critical as an investor. You don't want that turnover with your
just churn,
and then just right? When they have issues, as I say, just be a good landlord. A lot of these issues, I think people would be happy to rent if the landlord cared a little bit. Yeah,
but one of the issues though is that, back to the point, they're so overworked, property managers, and they've got responsibilities across everything they need to do. Technology can solve a lot of this and give them time back in their day, right? But every single senior leader I speak to in property management, that they want their property managers to be proactively calling up their investors, their landlord clients, going, I never get the call. Hey Phil, how you going?
Oh,
and I go,
no, they're putting out fires.
What's going on? Anything we've missed, anything we can do. Anything. You never get those sort of calls, because they're just going from one fire to the next, to the next, to the next, and they get at the end of the day and they go, "This ain't for me." There's got to be a better way. So,
nicely said. So if I'm listening and I'm an investor, how do they jump across? Is they got to go through their property manager? Can they choose to then make their payments through managed? What's the
make sure the agency you choose uses managed.
Okay.
Ask the question.
Yeah.
Do you use managed? No, we don't. Go, I want to use an agency that uses managed. But we're just about to launch a find a managed agency. So we'll I could probably give you the details of that before this goes out, and you can put it into the notes. So you actually look up, it's a search, click a button, it'll show you all the agencies in Australia that have that use managed, and you'll be able to find one near you. Call them up and say, "Hey, I'd like to use you. I want to get paid straight away."
Yeah, that's fine.
Pretty cool.
Mate, awesome. Hey, congrats, mate. That's a massive.
Yeah, it's good. It's good fun. I obviously care. But again, it comes back to this sort of, cascading narrative of how you end up doing what you're doing, right? It's only sort of when you get to a particular point. I think Steve Jobs once talked about it. It's only when you get to a particular point you can go back and join the dots.
I was just
to
about
work
to say,
out how you can get there.
This is you guys to a T, because if you kind of look at it, at that stage, Sterling Publishing, which is now Momentum Media, that's its infancy. You guys got into property. Property then helped you build a strong asset base and a foundation. The business obviously then is that next level of growth, and that's gone great guns, and they've gone into tech, and that's just probably in your level of competition, you're obliterating them, because they're still pumping out mags and trying to get revenue that way, and you've just gone asset mode, which is podcasts, events, technology, with your cornerstone being roots in property as well.
Yeah, we live and breathe property. Where we have a mortgage broking company, as you know.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yeah, you guys do.
Which we created that for the purpose of servicing property investors, much like you. So it's good to see property investment orientated mortgage brokers. To my earlier point, you may outgrow your broker. So you come and work with guys like you because property investment.
Yeah.
You need the right people on your team, but. We'll keep flying the flag for property investors and property advice in Australia, and I've got a bit of a thing at the moment around how do we maybe a question for you, how do we actually put a wrapper around the property advice industry? I don't think we've effectively done that yet as a sector, as a nation. Buyers agents, mortgage brokers, accountants, lawyers, financial planners, it is the property advice sector. And anyone that listens will hear me sort of preach this stuff. Property is at the center of Australia's future in terms of its economic prosperity, how we live and operate as a nation, and how we will grow as a nation. Because every single new Australian that comes to Australia needs somewhere to live. We need to make sure we've got the right place for them. They will be the engine room for growth of the nation in our part in Asia. So, you know, I had a discussion the other week with a sort of a senior person who was in the military for many years, and we spoke about how real estate or property, to choose your version of it, is the most central, critical infrastructure for Australia. If we get that right, and largely right, all the other sort of fringe critical infrastructure, which is telecommunication, fuel and energy and all that sort of stuff, will all pivot around property. So everyone's highly invested. So yeah, how do we put a wrapper around the property advice industry? So you'll hear me talking a bit about
Mate,
that.
I love it. Have you guys had Matt Barry on, out of curiosity? No. Have you heard him talk?
I have done, yeah.
Yeah. He calls it the Ponzi scheme.
No, the property scheme.
That's I'm desperate to get him on. What he dubs the Ponzi scheme, and it's a house of cards. I'd be very curious to find out, that perspective. Just going, I'm more curious than I am trying to more poke the bear.
Go and find out, right? Yeah. Like, you look at it, and if you're looking at Australia from an outwards perspective, you're going to go, something doesn't add up or stack up here, right? And look, maybe it is one massive Ponzi scheme. I doubt it, right? But you look for the clues of where the dough goes in Australia. So why is property so important to Australia? Well, our banks, even though we're a small little place here of
26 million, and we have four out of, like, I think they're in the top 20 most profitable banks in the world.
Yeah, they're strong, right? So we're intrinsically connected to the banking sector, who supports the property economy.
Stamp duty, revenue.
The biggest investors, institutional investors in the banking sector, are the superannuation funds, which are funded by the 12% that every Australian is putting into their super, right? So they're highly invested in it. The Australian government is now co-investing with Australians at an equity base, so they're highly connected with the inherent health and integrity of the Australian property market. Like the Australian government don't want to probably go back, and you saw in the most recent federal election, and I sort of spent a bit of time in Canberra speaking at pollies and stuff, and they all said to me, both sides, whether it's the government or the opposition, is that no Australian politician will ever really want to mess with the value of Australians' property or the inherent value of Australians' property, because I think 23 or 24% of all Australians live in rented accommodation. So everyone else is a property owner, and that's where most people hold their wealth, right? Yeah. And real estate can be a huge driver of supporting Australians through retirement. Yeah, we need self-funded retirees in Australia. It's good for the nation. Yeah. The government has an obligation for looking after those Australians which aren't fortunate enough to be able to do that themselves.
But that level of support will diminish as more Australians, like when I started working, were mandated to have super. Like that will turn off. That little bit of that will turn off. I think Sam Gordon calls it life support, which is fair enough.
Yeah, let Australians create their own wealth through property, 100%.
Right? We want to encourage people to be self-funded. I don't get why they're penalised in that sense.
Oh, but now they're going to throw out this sort of taxing unrealised gains, which is going to be indexed. I look at that and just go, guys, mate, you're looking through the telescope the wrong way, right?
Mate, 100%. It's a short term. Wait for the weakest link to catch up, mate. No, it's this market's happening with or without you.
It is, and then your state governments are all, sustained largely through real estate transactions. Property's pretty important, right? And we're trying to get it right as a nation. There's a lot of argument around it. I'm sure there'll be plenty of committees about to be set up around it all, but it's good fun.
It is, mate. Well, it keeps you guys going, that's for sure. Hey, Phil, I want to say thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. I mean, we'll include links to Smart Property Investment. So if you're living under a rock and you haven't tuned in, make sure you do. Check out some of the great guests I've had on there. We'll include links to Managed as well. Yep. I'd be very curious to see the spread of property managers and
find a managed agency. It's cool.
Yeah, cool. Let's have.
And I'll tell you what, if you call them up, they'll be very happy to chat with you. They'll go, yeah, sure, great.
I can imagine it would be a real growth opportunity in the property management space. And that's probably why I see a lot of BAs add now property management to their level of services.
A lot of them try it and do it for a while, then they go, I don't want to be in that game.
It'd be like mortgage brokers trying to get into conveyancing. Like you go, mate, you might be doing full service for a client, but it's one high touch, high work for very low return on time and investment.
Yeah, and it's good if you're a BA and you're buying a condensed area, but
Yeah.
you've probably got to move from there eventually.
Yeah, correct.
I think at a larger scale, there's probably merit, but that's horses for courses.
Spot on. Spot on. Hey guys, if you love this chat, let us know. We love the comments that are coming in. By all means, again, we'll try and wrangle the big fella to come back on, let you know what moves you're making,
Sure.
property and life as well, mate. Phil, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, and mate, keep up the good work.
Thanks, buddy.
It's I know you've got a passionate cohort of listeners who are relying on you and your business to sort their mortgage finance. But as we all know, property is a game of finance. Your broker is critical.
Correct.
You need a good broker if you're serious about investing in property.
Thanks, buddy. Good on you.
Good.
All right. Until next time, take care.